This video will go over solving quadratic equations using the quadratic formula. The first step in solving with the quadratic formula is to actually know what the formula is. So, even though this looks like a scary long formula, it really isn't that bad. I actually have a song that I want you to use to help you remember it. So, to memorize the quadratic formula, you can use Pop Goes the Weasel to help you.
The quadratic formula's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a.
I know it seems kind of silly at first, but the song actually really does help you memorize it. So play it a couple times, sing it to yourself, use that song to help you get to know this formula. In order to use this formula, first you have to know what a, b, and c are. So if you think about standard form of a quadratic, ax squared plus bx plus c, the a value is the number in front of x. In this case, there's an imaginary 1 in front of x squared. So your a value is 1. Your b value is the number in front of x. So in this case, b is 3. The c value is your constant, or the number that is alone. So in this example, your c value is negative 12. In order to use quadratic formula, you have to be able to determine a, b, and c. They are always going to be the coefficients in front of x squared and x. You will not include the variable x. So let's work our first example. We have 4x squared plus 11x minus 20 equals 0. So first, I'm going to determine a, b, and c. For this one, my a value is 4, my b value is 11, and my c value is negative 20. Then I'm going to write out the formula, and remember, you can use the song if you need to. And your first step is to plug in everything. You're going to plug in 4 for A, 11 for B, and negative 20 for C. So it's going to look something like this. Opposite B would be negative 11 plus or minus the square root. B squared is 11 squared minus 4 times A, which is 4, times C, which is negative 20, all over 2 times a, which in this case is 2 times 4. So your very first step is to just plug everything in for a, b, and c. Once you have done that, your goal is to simplify what's underneath the square root sign first. So I'm going to start with 11 squared. When I simplify this, I have negative 11 plus or minus the square root. 11 squared is 121, and then I have to multiply, use a different color, negative 4 times negative 20. Be careful with your signs when you do that. Negative 4 times negative 20 gives us positive 320. 2 times 4 on the bottom gives us positive 8. To continue simplifying what's underneath the square root, I am going to add 121 plus 320. And when I do that, I end up with 441. When it's time to take the square root, you have to determine if you have a perfect square or not. In this case, you can take the square root of 441. The square root of 441 is 21. So from here, I have two answers. I have 11 plus 21 over 8, and I have 11 minus 21 over 8. The first one, 32 over 8, simplifies to positive 4. The second one, negative 10 over 8, simplifies to negative 5 over 4. So basically with the quadratic formula, the steps are going to be very similar every time. You're going to plug everything in and then simplify what's underneath the square root. You always want to give your answer in the most simplified form as possible. Let's look at another one. X squared minus 5x minus 4. In this case, my a value is 1. There's an imaginary 1 in front of x squared. My b value is negative 5. And my c value is negative 24. I'm going to write out my formula. And at this point, I want you to pause the video and try to plug in A, B, and C. Once you've plugged those three things in, restart and see if you did it correctly. Be careful with this value right here. This says opposite B. So if your B is negative 5, the opposite of B would be positive 5. Then I have the square root of negative 5 squared. I want you to always put your b squared in parentheses. This is important when it comes to your signs. Negative 5 times negative 5 will give us positive 25. If you don't have parentheses there, the calculator will tell you that that's negative 25. So be careful and always use parentheses. Then we have minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is negative 24. And this is all over 2a, which in this case is 2 times 1. Negative 5 squared gives us positive 25. And negative 4 times 1 times negative 24, you have to be super careful with your signs there. Whenever you multiply those three things together, you will get positive 96. From here, 25 plus 96 gives us 121. And 121 is a perfect square. The square root of 121 is 11. So I have two answers. I have 5 plus 11 over 2, and I have 5 minus 11 over 2. The first one, 16 over 2, is going to reduce to positive 8. The second one, negative 6 over 2, is going to reduce to negative 3. Our next example is 4x squared plus 7x minus 15. On this one, my a value is 4, my b value is 7, and my c value is negative 15. First, I'm going to write out my formula. And what I would do next is pause the video, try this one on your own, and then restart when you're ready to check. Plugging in a, b, and c, opposite b would be negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 7 squared minus 4 times a, which is 4, times c, which is negative 15, and this is all over 2 times 4. From here, you're going to simplify what's underneath the square root first. So I have negative 7 plus or minus the square root of 49, and then be really careful with your signs whenever you're multiplying the negative 4 times negative 15. When you multiply those three together, you get positive 240. From here, 49 plus 240 gives us 289, and 289 is a perfect square. We get 17. When you take the square root, since that's a perfect square, the square root sign will go away. Now from here, I have two answers. I have negative 7 plus 17 over 8, and I have negative 7 minus 17 over 8. The first one, 10 over 8, reduces to 5 over 4. The second one, negative 24 over 8, reduces to negative 3. Our last example is 2x squared plus 39 equals negative 18x. If you notice, this is different from the other ones we did because it's not set equal to 0. All of the other problems we did were already written in standard form, with x squared first, x in the middle, and then your constant. Before we begin on this one, we need to move the 18x to the other side. So the opposite of negative 18x is positive 18x. But when you move that over, be careful, you want this to be in the right order. So we're going to write this as 2x squared plus 18x plus 39. When you determine A, B, and C, be careful and make sure your problem is in the correct order before you begin. A is the number in front of x squared, which in this case is 2. B is the number in front of x, which in this case is 18. C is your constant, or the number alone, in this case is 39. If you have your problem in the wrong order and you don't have the right A, B, and C, then your whole thing will be wrong. From here, I'm going to write out my formula. And I'm going to plug in A, B, and C. If you want to try this on your own, pause the video and then restart once you're ready to check. Opposite B would be negative 18 plus or minus the square root of 18 squared minus 4 times A, which is 2, times C, which is 39. This is all over 2 times 2. Now, to simplify what's underneath the square root, 18 squared gives us 324. And then be careful with your signs when you have negative 4 times 2 times 39. When you multiply those together, you get negative 312. 324 minus 312 leaves us with 12. And then pay close attention to the end of this problem. 12 is not a perfect square, so I can't take the square root of 12. In this case, you have to simplify the square root of 12 using what we know about simplifying radicals. If you need to rewatch that video, you totally can. To break down 12, I can use 4 and 3, and 4 breaks down to 2 and 2. So I have a pair of 2's with the 3 left over. You always want to simplify your square roots whenever you can. So this becomes negative 18 plus or minus 2 square root 3 all over 4. Remember, pairs come out. Finally, I can simplify the 18, the 2, and the 4. You're not going to touch the 3 since it's underneath the square root. We're going to leave that as the square root of 3. But I can divide 18, 2, and 4 all by 2. So these would reduce to negative 9 plus or minus 1 square root 3 over 2. You could also write this without the 1 and it would mean the same thing. So if you can't take the square root, if you don't have a perfect square, you will leave your answer with the square root format. Technically, we do have two answers here. I could separate this and write this as negative 9 plus the square root of 3 over 2 and negative 9 minus the square root of 3 over 2. I would take either option. Those mean the same thing.